So thank you so much for coming. I'm in CPTV today with our next candidate for Congress, Chris Mitchum. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's just cut right to the chase.
Okay.
Why are you running?
I'm running because I can't stand what's happening to my country. I have a little bit of elective office experience. I was National First Vice President of the Screen Actors Guild, and I actually was asked to run for state assembly back in 1998 by Assembly Leader Bill Leonard. So I ran an office, for office then, and I'm equipped. I don't have a full-time job. I'm semi-retired. Have my own businesses. I'm in a position to. Went to the University of Pennsylvania, so I'm well-educated, well-spoken, being an actor for 32 years. So I want to get into this fight, see if I can make a difference.
All right. Could you maybe then talk about what sort of experience you have that you think would help you if you are elected to Congress?
The thing that helps me the most, which I think a lot of politicians are lacking, is principles. They go up there and they start negotiating back and forth, and they lose sight as to why they went there in the first place. Or maybe they just go there to get a job. I don't know. There was an event held for me in Boston back in April 26th. People back there wanted to hold a fundraising event for me. I felt a little guilty being from Santa Barbara, going to Boston for an event, so I invited 3 other candidates, one named Barry Hinckley, who's running for Senate in Rhode Island, and then Jeff Simone and Robert Taché, who are running for Congress in Massachusetts. And 201, everybody is pretty much a first-time politician. They're business people. They're tired of seeing their business dwindle because of the restrictions and hampers that are put on the business community. And they are going to run for office and try to turn this country back around so they can get back to the business of doing business. And there's a crop of people running for office this time. I equate it to the Tea Party in 2010. It's an upsurgence of people who are not really politicians, and they don't want to be politicians. They want to go to Washington, and some to the state level, some to city council. But they want to get in there because they see what's going wrong, and they want to go in and make a difference and change it and get us back on track. We need to get this country back to the Constitution and government back in the hands of the people and get government off our backs. So
then going off that, let's start talking about some of the issues you stand for. I was looking on your website. You say that excessive regulation is leading to a lot of our farmland turning into a dust bowl. Could you maybe explain that?
Well, go over to Bakersfield, Sacramento, and you look at the valley over there with the Delta smelt or whatever it is, the way they've shut off the water on these farmers. They're running 30–40% unemployment over there, putting farmers out of business for a fish that's not even indigenous. This is absurd. This controlling business, destroying business over this heavy regulation that's going on. And we need to change things like that.
So what is your plan to improve that?
Well, first of all, we have to undo virtually everything that's been done in the past 3.5 years, and hopefully by leading at the national level, states will follow when they see things starting to work again, when they see the country getting back on track. A state like California, who constantly makes the same mistake over and over. People and businesses leave the state of California, so they raise taxes, so more people in business leave the state of California. It's crazy. It goes back to that old joke, the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's what California's doing. And hopefully if we can lead the nation, states like California will say, let's get these bums out that are messing up our state and get everything back in line. Look at Wisconsin. In 2 years, they balanced the budget and they've increased 40,000 jobs. It can be done. States can turn around, but you have to have the leadership in place to do it.
So, can you tell us about how you would plan on fixing the deficit? That's obviously huge. You mentioned a Mack Penny plan.
Yeah. The Mack Penny plan is something devised by Connie Mack, who's a congressman out of Florida. And what it is, it's an 8-year plan. The Ryan plan cuts the debt by $2 trillion by the year 2020. The Mack Penny plan is an 8-year plan. It starts by keeping this year's budget the same as it was last year's. And what that does is automatic. There's like nobody really knows exactly what it is, but the baseline budget always rises every year, and it seems to be pretty much tied with inflation. Last time we had a budget at the federal level, it went up almost 7.5%. I think one of the reasons why the Senate is not doing a budget now is because if you see what the inflation level really is, people will be shocked. And anybody who goes to the store and buys stuff can see And it seems like a year or two years ago, a hamburger was like $1.39 a pound. Now it's like $5 a pound. I mean, this is crazy. We have some serious inflation going on. So you freeze it, you don't have that automatic raise. Then everything across the board, everything in the budget, starting with this year and the next 5 years, so for 6 years, you cut everything by 1%, which is where it gets the name penny. And I mean, if you had to cut your budget by a penny to the dollar, that's not really a hard thing to do. Year 7 and 8, you hold spending to 18% of gross domestic product. And the reason why you do that is a man named W. Kurt Hauser, and anybody can Google him, Hauser's Law. In '93, he wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal. And what he had done, he had studied personal income tax rates going back to 1950 to 93. And this has been verified by numerous studies since. The most recent has been by Harvard. And he found that no matter what the tax rate, and it's surprising to learn that from 1952 to 54, the tax rate on the rich was 92%. There's hardly any point in getting up and going to work with that kind of a tax rate. No matter what the tax rate, the money taken by the government hovers right around 19% of gross domestic product. So no matter what the tax rate. Which begs the question, why do Democrats always want to raise taxes? The reason why, if you picture a bar graph, everything in the bar is finite. It doesn't change. That's the 19%. The height of your graph is the tax rate. The base is the people paying into tax, your base people supplying the money. And just because the area inside the graph is constant, as you raise the graph, the base has to narrow, which means people are getting unemployed. You lower the tax rate, the base spreads out until you reach the maximum employment, which is about 3.5% unemployed, like they have in North Dakota right now. So the question is, why do big government Democrats like to raise the taxes? The answer to that is, if you're not working, you're going to go on unemployment, you're going to go on welfare, you're going to go on Social Security disability insurance, you're going to be getting government subsidies to exist. And if you do that, you're going to keep voting for that government that's giving it to you so that you can exist. It's all about power. It has nothing to do with the revenues generated. It's all about power. So what Connie Mack does is he freezes year 7 and 8 at 18%, and since the government takes in 19%, 7 and 8, you have a 1% of gross domestic product surplus. Now you can start looking at things like Social Security and Medicare and other problems. At the end of 8 years, you've cut the debt by $7.5 trillion, that's with a T, dollars. Now that's a sizable cut. We'll get our AAA rating back as a country, and we're back on our feet again. Now you go back. When I was National First Vice President of the Guild, every single year we had Price Waterhouse come in and do an audit. Every year. And we looked at that audit and we saw what we're doing wrong, what we could do better, what needed to be tweaked. And once we took a good look at how we were functioning, we then went and did our budget for the next year to run. It was a 74,000 member union at that time. I don't think the federal government has ever been audited, ever. And I guarantee you, if the federal government is audited, you're going to find more than enough waste to cut out that will pay for that audit. Then you go back in and you look at things like Department of Education. Nothing in the Constitution says the federal government is supposed to take care of local education. Absolutely nothing. You only need to know two things about Department of Education. It was made a cabinet position by Jimmy Carter, who was a disastrous president, gave us double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation. And last year, our SAT scores were the lowest in history. $77 million a year saved. We put education back into the hands of the communities and the state. And you can go through and look at other departments like this and make even more cuts. So by the end of 8 years, that $7.5 trillion debt cut, along with the balanced budget amendment and the surplus coming in, you're going to see a huge cut on our debt and a major turnaround in our economy.
So you talk about education. That was actually one of my questions I wanted to ask you about. So you wanted to change the system a little bit with some like teacher evaluations.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, on a local level, we have to have, I mean, the idea of tenure, because you've been there a long time, you get to stay there. And you get a bright new teacher who's enthusiastic and a good teacher, and they have to do a cut. That's the one that goes because they're new. That's crazy. Absolutely nuts. Look at the test scores of these kids in these classes, and if they're consistently low, pull in the teacher, see what's wrong. Maybe it's their teaching skills are bad, or maybe they're just not very bright. Maybe they just flat out need to be replaced because they're incompetent on teaching their subject. But take a look at it, and after review, make a decision as to whether or not they need to be replaced or educated, or individual situations as to how to deal with it. But yeah, we have to start doing something with our education. We need to get rid of social engineering in our classrooms. There's nothing on an SAT tour there's no sex education questions on an SAT test. None. You teach an hour-long class on sex education, that's an hour you've taken away from science or math or something that is on the test.
But do you think it should all be focused on what's on the test? I mean, that kind of matters in real life, too.
I think government ought to get out of raising our family. I think the Hillary Clinton view of it takes a village to raise a child is wrong. That's a socialist concept. I think families need to be raised by family members. We need to get government out of raising our families.
Okay. So could you talk about also, so we'll keep on the topic of education.
Okay.
So higher education institutions like ourselves are experiencing a lot of tuition hikes.
Yes, you are.
Do you have anything that you would help us out with that kind of thing?
One of the obvious things, when we were actually exploring natural resources, royalties went to keep the tuition down in state college and universities. We have just off of Santa Barbara County, just Santa Barbara County, identified 2 billion barrels of oil. That's enough to give the state of California for the next 20 years $400 million a year. Put that into the state college and university system. That'll bring the tuitions down. A quarter of that goes into the county of Santa Barbara. They will get $100 million a year. And that's just what they know is there. They believe there's another 17 to 20 billion barrels of oil out there. That's enough to drill for the next 200 years. As far as the ecology, 1969, when they had the big blowout, it killed, they estimate, 3,600 birds. 2005, January, in Ventura, because of heavy rains pushing, as it went down into the ground, pushing oil into the channel, by seepage, natural seepage, 5,000 birds died. By natural causes, by being covered with oil, naturally. Pumping the oil out takes pressure off. Since 1969, by accident, and that's a long time ago, 1969, by accident, 844 barrels of oil have been spilled into the channel by accident. 160 to 244 barrels a day are going into the channel by seepage. You talk to the Santa Barbara City Bird Rescue Organization down there, the biggest patient that they have coming in are birds covered with oil. Today, in 1 week, there's more natural seepage polluting the channel than there has been since 1969 by accident. Now, on top of that, after the big spill in 69, 1971 February, UCSB did a study of the channel. Their bio department was out there to see what kind of permanent damage there was. They found zero. All the fisheries and habitats had returned to normal, absolutely normal. And this is a year and a half after the spill. Why? Because there are microorganisms that actually eat oil. That's why they can't find anything in the Gulf, because they have a lot of seepage there. The reason why the Exxon Valdez was a big problem is there's no natural oil there. So there are no microorganisms there. So people had to clean it up. But down here, it's a natural process that otherwise just the natural seepage, the beaches would be so covered with tar you wouldn't be able to walk on them. But because we have these organisms constantly feeding off the oil, it kind of keeps a balance. And if we remove oil, get more out, it creates jobs. Look at North Dakota, 3.5% unemployment, starting job in the $60,000 range, $83,000 a year median salary in the oil fields. 3.5% unemployment. They're not all working in the oil fields because so many people came and there was no housing and it started a construction boom. Now families are moving in, they have to build a school, hire teachers, and it ripples throughout the entire economy. We can do that not only to this district, but to this country. You look at another aspect of it, we use 18 million barrels of oil a day. 6 years ago, 12 million a day, or 2 out of 3, were imported. Today, 9 million, or 1 out of 2, are imported. Why? North Dakota. Cut our usage by 3 million barrels of oil a day. In 6 years, we can be totally oil independent. We can be shipping oil to other countries, cutting down our trade deficit, and we have enough to last for the next 200 years running the country at today's rates. And this is only with the oil and gas that we know are there now. And gas is a very clean fuel for energy. This is what we know is there now. And in 1913, they said, we only have enough oil to last for another 6 years. That's in 1913. As we learn more, we'll find more. And it's good for the environment. It gets people working. It helps the economy. It makes us energy independent from the Arabs. It lowers our trade deficit. Show me a downside.
Okay. Well, you kind of answered a lot of the questions about energy. So then I guess also we've asked most of the candidates what their stance on our current healthcare system is.
Well, the healthcare system is great. The problem is the cost, and everybody alive today is to blame for that. You know, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as health insurance. None. It didn't exist. You went to a doctor, you talked about, you know, what he thought was wrong with you, and we could do this test or that test, and how much is it, boom, and you were part of the process of your medical care. And if you couldn't pay your bill, he sent you a bill, and you paid, you know, back then you could live for a year on $5,000. So you'd send in $20 a month or something, and 3 or 4 months you'd pay off your bill. Well, the HMOs rose up, and businesses started offering health insurance through HMOs to get a hiring edge over their competitors. Well, then everybody did it, so the other company didn't have a hiring edge. Well, with that and malpractice going up, and malpractice insurance rates going up, because people are sue crazy in this country. I mean, my father-in-law was a cardiologist, and he gave up his practice. The malpractice insurance became so expensive, and the paperwork so timely, he had to hire two people to do Medicare, Medicaid paperwork. He said, forget it. He became a consultant at UCLA Medical. Just gave it up. It became so expensive, and it is so expensive, that you go into a doctor, and because he's worried about being sued, in which case his rates will go up even more, he gives you 23 tests that aren't necessary, but he wants to cover everything in case he gets sued. And you say, okay, sure, let's do them. What do you care? You're paying $25 copay. You don't care, because you're not a part of the process anymore. People have to get back in being part of the process. We have to strictly regulate tort reform, that really define what malpractice is and put limits on what people can get, so these outrageous awards are not happening. And $13 million on a woman who spilled her own hot coffee driving away from McDonald's into her lap. I mean, that's crazy. Things like this. Anyway, you need to break down the borders between states so that insurance companies can compete to lower the cost of insurance. We need to, things like Medicare, that people be able to invest in their own programs rather than take it from the government. Every dollar you give to the government, 60 cents comes back. 40 cents is left to run the government. Wouldn't you rather have the dollar to spend on yourself, on insurance or something, rather than give the government the dollar and they spend 60 cents on it for you? And to move government out of our own decision making is necessary. You know, back when I was a young man, we had free clinics, and doctors got tax credits for putting, every day they went into the office at the free clinic and donated their time working there, they got a tax credit to help lower their tax rate. And something like that might be worth looking into. Take the pressure off the emergency room. People could actually go to, you know, a care center that's there and it's free, or if you have an ability to pay, you pay a little something or whatever your ability is to help make the clinic keep working. You make it a nonprofit organization, and you can have these all over the country. So there are a lot of things we can do to lower the cost, because our medical care is excellent. And Obamacare is not about medical care, it's about control over 1/6 of our economy. It is to our medical world what Dodd-Frank is to our financial world. And Dodd-Frank is basically a takeover of every financial institution in this country.
Okay, well, thank you. You really definitely covered a lot of the issues that are important right now. So I guess bringing it back more a little to the Central Coast aspect, how do you plan on representing the Central Coast if you're elected?
Well, in 1776, the guy who picked up his musket and his backpack and left his home and his job and his family and everything and went to Valley Forge to fight, he was not fighting to represent Camden, Delaware. He was fighting to save his country and to preserve liberty. That's what he was fighting for. I do not intend to go to Washington to represent the 24th District to bring back baseball fields. That's not why I'm going. I'm going to fight for my country, and I happen to come from the 24th District. if we get the country rolling, hopefully these idiots up in Sacramento will see what doing something right, how it works, and they'll follow suit, or the people of California will get smart enough to get these idiots out of there so that we can get this economy thriving again and get people, you know, one of the things with Reaganomics and the trickle-down theory, when he lowered taxes, the trickle was not the more money coming in from taxpayers. That stayed at about 19%, as we discussed with Hauser's law. What happened is because everybody was working, they were driving more, they were buying more, they were traveling more. So other federal taxes that applied started creating more revenues. That is where the trickle was. It went into other tax bases. And that's why the revenues coming into the federal government really exploded under Reagan years. The 19% remained the same. It was all the other federal taxes that grew, brought in more revenues. And it's because everyone was working.
Okay, well, I think we're kind of running out of time.
All right.
But since the goal of this is to definitely just get to know your congressman candidates, is there any last words you want to say just to talk about yourself?
No. You know, one of the things that makes this an interesting race is, you know, I'm staunch anti-tax raise person. And I explained Hauser's law and the reason why. My two main opponents in this race, Lois Capps, never saw a tax hike she didn't like. And Abel Maldonado either doesn't understand Hauser's law or he should have a D by his name instead of an R, because he voted for the largest tax raise in California's history in return for the Democrats to approve his appointment to Lieutenant Governor by Schwarzenegger. And that is so anti-basic tenets of the Republican Party, because we are, the Republican Party in which I grew up was like the Tea Party today. You know, lower taxes, smaller government, you know, they were constitutional Americans, and that's still pretty much where I am. And our Constitution put in our amendments as firewalls to protect us from government. That's why the amendments are there. The Constitution defines the role of government. The amendments are firewalls so the government can't come back and break our Constitution. So to see someone like Abel, who says he's a Republican, sell out these basic tenets of the Republican Party to vote for the highest tax raise in California history, and I just don't understand it. So I think this is a very clear race with Abel and Lois on one side and myself as the alternative on the other.
Okay. Well, thank you very much
for
taking the time to meet with us.
And I have a website, chrismitchumforcongress.com, if anybody wants to go on there and see some more. You know, they can email me.
Perfect.
Like that.
All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.